Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information that you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Monday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning.
Happy Monday.
There we go. Best day of the week. And we're off to a busy little start. So we've got some fun topics to cover. Some news that we're talking about pre-show. So I'm excited to get into it. Brandy?
I know. Well, I actually have some big news of my own. It's bittersweet, but as of last week, I am no longer the COO of Romy. My tenure has come to an end. So it's crazy. It would have been exactly 9 years tomorrow, so just a couple days short. But it's wild. I mean, it's something that I started, right out of grad school, and so it's I'm excited for some changes, but it's definitely a little surreal.
The end of an absolute era. I remember meeting you and Andreas and Will, not Slickers, at Vrbo. Was it Orlando? Maybe 8 years ago.
There's that, or there was also the one in Miami. Maybe, yeah. So
that was after, though.
That was after. Yeah. I know it's so crazy. I remember, we're going to talk a little bit about Vrbo today. And I remember my first ever conference was a home away summit in Orlando. And they had just announced, I think, like the subscription payment model, and people were losing their mind. And I remember Andreas and I were the youngest people there by like 20 years. And it was 15. It was very crazy. So yeah, it's very strange. And like the day just ended and I was like, okay, now that's done. But it's, we built a lot of amazing things. And so it's just I talked to someone who said that he thought of his career in these like 10-year cycles. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking of it. We're just at the beginning of whatever is next.
Well,
congratulations.
Congrats. Yeah. And excited to dig in and learn more about what's next over the coming weeks.
Yeah.
And in the coming weeks, we have some fun stuff going on. Heading down to Mexico City for a guest eval. If you're going, we would love to hear about it. We want to hang out with you. We want to meet you. If you have breaking news for us, we'll do a micro episode. We could push it live. Or we could hold it and edit it depending on how it goes. But it's guest eval. I've heard incredible things. I have not been fortunate enough to go to one myself. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, it was the one. I've been to the one in Austin, the one in Tel Aviv, and I think like easily the best conferences I've ever been to. Like so much fun, great, really well produced, like really great sessions, and great food. And if you've ever been to Mexico City, the food in general is great. So it's going to be a really fun time.
And
you don't have to be a guest user. You can just be interested in the industry and, want to come and learn more from your fellow operators and from the people at Guesty.
Yep. We're lining up interviews with Verid and Dave Angotti, Steve Schwab, and we've got a whole list of others that we look forward to talking to. But hope to see you down in Mexico City in 2.5 weeks. Right around the corner.
It's crazy. Time is flying.
Well, last week, let's see, where do we want to start today? Jamie, do you have any preference?
Okay.
Let's start with Vrbo. I feel like when I see LinkedIn posts that say social media is going crazy, I'm like, ooh, I am
juicy.
Like, let's see what people are going crazy about this time. So what was the headline this week or this last week, Michael, that people were going crazy
announces about? New guest cancellation policy. And on this, before we even jump into it, it's almost predictable. Vrbo does this every year. They rip the Band-Aid, they throw a challenging policy out there, and then they take it head first, straight on, going into conference season. So big respect to them for not announcing it after conference season and letting it kind of simmer throughout the industry forever. Big props, kudos for facing it head on. Now, I think we can all understand why this policy is causing a bit of a storm. But basically, if a guest arrives at your house and is unable to walk in, and then they have to go be relocated, they call Vrbo, hey, I can't get in, then the property management company or homeowner has to refund them the full amount. Totally fair. I get that 100%. Plus up to 100% fee on top of it. And part of the justification there is Vrbo is going to find a relocation for a comparable, better unit to ensure a guest experience there. Again, totally fair, totally get it. The challenge is that you get a week-long stay that's, call it $20,000, then you could be losing $20,000 on that reservation. Now, a little context as to why they have done this. They saw people avoiding cancellations because of their cancellation fee, because host-initiated cancellation fees within certain timeframes also cause a penalty. That guests or hosts were actually stranding the guests at the door. And so instead of canceling, they were just like, just let them show up. I'm not going to let them get in. And then I don't have to pay the fee. Well, now you do. And with that rationale, it makes total sense. Operationally, I think there's 10 different things we're going to get into, including vendor challenges. But I'll pause that vendor discussion here in a minute. Brandy?
Yeah, I think I totally get the frustration of a guest showing up and not being able to get in. And if they can't get in and they've called and like you're still not, totally fair. I think that what Expedia does, what Booking.com does for relocation is you get charged the difference in the relocation fees. And that, can certainly hurt a host in terms of dollar amount, especially if it's like a high volume weekend and where they have to relocate them has surge pricing and that kind of thing. But I think that would make a little bit more sense in covering the relocation cost if it was the same thing that their parent company does. And I also wonder what the parameters are. Like, did the guest try to get in touch with the host? I can think of examples where, for Vrbo, the host is the merchant of record. So if you had someone who has a credit card that's gotten declined and you've revoked their check-in instructions, and people are still trying to get in, it was kind of the same thing with the host cancellation policy, where there's a lot of proof that you have to show as an operator to show like why this person couldn't get in. And so I think that there's a lot of, aside from kind of like the vendor issues, which we'll cover in a moment, there might need to be some more clarity around like, what is like the time? Like I tried once and I couldn't get in. I've also seen people like looking at their boarding pass or check-in instructions that have like step-by-step instructions and not be able to figure it out. So kind of like, what are the parameters for being relocated and enacting this charge?
Yeah. And two thoughts here. One is on, and want to understand more on whether this is really a property manager versus host issue. As I could very much see it with property managers, like you've got homeowners that maybe last minute decide they want to use their property and you want to be accommodative of that. But also like now there's a real fee and consequence of canceling that. And ultimately it was Vrbo looking bad for all these host initiated cancellations of people just not comfortable that when they book a short-term rental, when they book a vacation rental, that's not going to get canceled down the line because of the whim of the homeowner, and sort of really making some penalty to, if you're going to rent out your home, like, and you're going to sort of cancel last minute on the guest, like that there's going to be some sort of monetary penalty associated with it, and that there's not going to be a way to get around it. So, and generally I think that's good, but also seeing like on the tech side, like I'm living a Yale lock like nightmare of like they do not notify you that the batteries are dead until like the day before it goes dead. And I now
You have
I
20
know,
minutes to change the battery.
now I know I just need to change them every 2 months, whether they're dead or not. Like, just like need to change them. But like it is, there's some real tech issues in our industry around this sort of stuff.
Yeah. And I think this policy, before we jump on the vendor side, because I got a lot of comments over there as well.
Yeah.
I think this policy highlights the fact that Vrbo knows their primary customer is the guest. They want to do right by the guest. They also know their primary supply source is professional managers versus an Airbnb, because professional managers should be able to, in 90% of the instances, relocate that guest elsewhere if there's a lock issue, if there's a leak or some other legitimate cause. And if they're doing it nefariously, then, that's their own fault. They should get fined. They should get feed, because Vrbo is trying to run a professional platform, just as all of us are in the industry. And we don't need the black eye of the sketchy activity. So it's really interesting to see the differentiations of Vrbo's policies getting rolled out in Airbnb's policies, because Airbnb's almost always skew single host preference, whereas Vrbo's tend to skew professional host, right? So Jamie, your house that you rent out on Vrbo, guest shows up, they can't get in. You're going to have to relocate them yourself, or you're going to face the fine. You can't put them in another one of your houses because you have one house. Now, Brandy, in her former life at Romy Sextants, could just put them in the unit next door, right? So it's a lot easier for professional managers with lots of units, especially comparable units. So I love to see the differences come out in the policies. But to dive in on the vendor side, if I am a locks provider, whether it's the physical lock or remote lock, Operto, etc., you've got to step up your game now, because there are serious fines and penalties on the line if the guests are unable to get in the unit. And this is just going to lead to that Spider-Man, 3 people pointing at 3 people meme, right? Who's responsible? Well, the batteries were out. Well, you didn't tell me the batteries were out. Well, the manager didn't replace them. Well, the system behind the lock was down or it was broken. Then you're just going to have the finger pointing, and somebody's going to be eating a potentially significant fine from Vrbo. So vendors are going to have to, and I encourage the industry to kind of lean on the vendors on this one, to have SLAs of guaranteed access to units. And if you can't guarantee access to the units, then you're going to be needing to eat some or all of the fine.
Yeah, I have I won't name names on the podcast, but in the recent past, we had an issue where in our multifamily buildings, there's a keypad access, and there was just a system-wide outage, across all of their systems. And so you couldn't get in the doors. And so we had to have them unlocked. We had to hire security to just stand there. And some of these buildings aren't that big, so they're not even really doing a lot, but you just couldn't have them open. And it was over a weekend, and they didn't have a lot of people working on the weekend about it, on the thing. And that was just incredibly frustrating. There's really no way that you can solve it. And at the end, you get an email that's like, sorry about it. That was what happened, and we were the ones that identified that there must have been a serious issue because it was happening across all of the buildings, and there wasn't an immediate alert that hey, this is happening. So it is really frustrating, because as the hosts or an operator, you are held to, when any of these things happen, it's on you. And sometimes it's really not your fault. You're not changing the batteries. Okay, yeah, that's kind of your fault. But if there's a system-wide outage, you don't really have a lot of control over that. And if you're spread over a large geographic area, that could be really difficult to manage.
Yeah, last comment. So I was up at my mountain house this past weekend, and because of this cancellation policy or host policy, you know what I did? I reinstalled my lockbox.
Yep.
in a hidden spot. And now I have a physical key ready for a guest in case there is ever an outage in the future. So no, that's not really a solution in most multifamily buildings, but it is great now having that peace of mind. Like if the whole system goes down, like I can give them a physical code. They're going to be able to get a physical key and get into the house.
Yeah.
It's hard to recover from a stay where the guests can't get inside.
Yeah, you're really starting like way behind. Then they're going to notice every cleaning issue, every little speck of dust, anything that goes wrong is going to be noted for sure.
Yeah. So next topic. This one I was really excited about. We've all been sort of waiting with bated breath on what's going to happen next for the Casago and Vacasa. Now we have seen sort of the plan start to play out. So Casago bets on franchise model taking over to take over Vacasa properties. So headline from Dennis at Skift, like we're seeing and the purchases go through of local Casago franchisees buying the contracts for the Vacasa properties in their markets. So really excited to see sort of the plan start to really take shape. Was excited when Dennis reached out to and get some data behind it. And what we saw was the growth that we're seeing for franchise operators. And there's quite a few others besides just Casago. There's iTrip, Grand Welcome, Skyrun. We're seeing growth of north of 8% now, listings on a year-over-year growth basis versus other property managers seeing growth of just under 4%. So almost above double the growth rate we're seeing for the franchise operators in the US, and a really slow growth environment that we're in right now.
I wish I could have flagged it 2.5 years ago, but when we were on the show, I remember making a comment about Vacasa needing to sell off local markets and turn their business into a franchise. Well, they didn't pull it off, but Steve Schwab and team are pulling that off right now. So it makes total sense. You know, you can't keep Vacasa in current state, in current form, and operate both Casago and Vacasa. So sell off market by market, turn that into a franchise, or sell it to the existing franchisee if they're already in the market. Makes total sense. I think that was the expectation of what we were going to be seeing. But the fact that it's starting to happen, and I would anticipate we get a lot more announcements between now and in conference season on a number of other transactions happening. But it's a good thing for the industry to start getting clarity and understand where the future of Vacasa is going. And it's a good thing for Casago to do it as fast as they possibly can before the churn from the Vacasa homeowners really sets in.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity if you're in a market that had a large Vacasa presence and that was a big competitor of yours. If you lost homeowners to them at some point, you can now buy them all back in one fell swoop. And it's also great. I think there's been a lot of, I mean, not totally unjustly, but some skepticism about whether this is going to be, they're going to be able to pull off this kind of transition. So they're off to the races pretty quickly. So hopefully we'll see more of these in the next couple months. And, this slow shift from Vacasa over to Casago happens. But if I was a operator looking to expand pretty dramatically at one point, this is a really great way to do that.
And we will be able to ask Steve Schwab in person at Guest Eval in 2.5 weeks. Looking forward to that.
Will turn out to be one of the great and sort of, I think, industry pivots if they're able to pull this off, of being able to get, and they don't disclose sort of the sale prices, but if they're even getting close to market in terms of selling those contracts to the local operators and then getting the sort of franchisees on the back end, like this is a great sort of, will be a great financial play if they're able to sort of pull it off.
Well, they bought it on pennies on the dollar. So being able to flip that into anything, even if it's half of market rate, is still, they're buying it at a quarter of market rate, then they're in great shape. So And it'll be really interesting to see who buys that inventory, whether it's existing Costco markets. And to be fair, they're pre-existing Costco markets in North America. They had a good footprint, but it wasn't massive. They certainly weren't in every market. And so this is a way that now they can get in a lot more markets. I think Vacasa had, someone can correct me, something like 70 different markets. So that's a lot of net new for Casago. And it'll be interesting to see who buys that inventory in those net new markets. Is it the largest player in the space? And then are they going to go flag Casago? Or is it going to be a small player that now has a significant flag in market? So I'm excited to see who's going to end up being the acquirer of some of this inventory. And some of the Vacasa markets are, they're market leaders in said markets, and others they're smaller inventory counts.
Well, and speaking of big news in our space, and I guess a company going in the opposite direction, we have some news out of Oyo going public. So it's a pretty huge valuation, 7 to 8 billion. Chump change. No, but it's interesting to see some, news in this direction. We've seen obviously Vacasa get taken private. Sonder is, kind of, I don't know, doing whatever Sonder's doing at the moment. It doesn't not going in a positive direction, at least not from a public market standpoint. So now seeing Oyo go public is pretty big. And their biggest brand in the US is Motel 6. Is that correct? Yes. So not in the STR space, but certainly a really large hospitality player.
But globally, they are very big in the vacation rental space. So Oyo Vacation Rentals, they've got quite a few brands. They just purchased Made Comfy in Australia. So they have been making significant strides in the short-term rental space. Bell Villa, Dan Center, like they've got some huge presence in Europe. And I suspect like they might be looking in the US. How are they going to get their foothold in the US vacation rental space? Because it seems if they already have a huge presence in Europe, already have a huge presence in Australia, that they might be looking to sort of get that foothold in the States.
And the companies they've been buying, like Made Comfy in Australia was the biggest, and Bell Villa was top 3. They're buying significant unit counts. And the fact that they didn't buy Vacasa is interesting. I would imagine Casago's probably fielded some interest, some calls amongst another, handful, but there's not that many at the scale that Oyo typically likes to buy. And with Oyo going public at, was it 7 to 8 billion? They've raised 3.5 billion roughly. So, it's not an Airbnb IPO trading at like 90x. Jamie probably has those numbers in front of him, but it's still going to be a pretty big IPO for the hospitality space. What'll be interesting is the fact that, aside from Motel 6, they don't really have an American presence. So how well will this be met on Wall Street, especially given some comps out there? But what's good for them is a lot of their comps are going to be more hotel players than short-term rental players. So,
and also like, don't forget, like this is their 3rd time announcing an IPO. So they haven't even announced it. This is a rumor of IPO. So like they actually filed papers in 2021 at $1 billion. And that was after SoftBank sort of invested in 2019 at like a $10 billion valuation when like SoftBank was throwing money into everything. So they also almost went public again in 2023. So the rumor and is just a rumor right now, but it will be exciting to see them because they were a growth story pre-COVID. Like they were rocking and rolling. Like they were, and I still see Oyo hotels around Atlanta. Like they were a really strong conversion brand. They were going to run revenue management. They were going to maximize revenue for you. You could and get guaranteed revenue from them, and let them sort of manage the revenue side. So they were trying new business models. They were trying new ways to sort of leverage data. I think some of it was smoke and mirrors, and by the sort of collapse in valuation that they saw. But I'm excited for them to see what's next.
Company having smoke and mirrors, that doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah.
There's nothing that comes to mind when you say SoftBank and overinflated companies.
No.
But I wish them luck. We all need good travel, hospitality, IPOs. And based on how much they've raised, it will at least be a positive outcome for them and investors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's hope the third time is the charm.
And then last quick thing we want to touch on. 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we predicted who Airbnb was going to be buying with the war chest that they're sitting on. And Sir Jamie himself, Nostradamus, said maybe Tripadvisor, because Viator's brand is really the gap that Airbnb wants or needs. And we saw an article recently, last week, that Tripadvisor is now feeling pressure to spin off Viator. So, Jamie, Brandy, what do y'all want to?
Yeah, I mean, my kind of comment or take on this is more just like on the missed opportunity of Tripadvisor. I mean, you go anywhere in the world and you can see those Tripadvisor stickers on restaurant or shop door, like top 10 on Tripadvisor. It was such a trusted brand and way of internationally distinguishing that a place was worth visiting or had at least a good reputation that other people trusted going there. They had a really great opportunity to become, I think, a formidable OTA, and that just their distribution side just collapsed and really never took off. And I think that's just such a shame, because now this global brand recognition isn't worth, what it could have been. And now this other business is going to potentially be spun off. So I think it's just a kind of a sad story and missed opportunity.
Yeah. I love the two experienced brands out there, Viator and Get Your Guide. I think Airbnb has a huge missed opportunity by just going off after the unique type stays. Like, the most sort of booked experiences are the Louvre tour, are the walking tour of downtown. It's the things that everyone's doing. And just like short-term rentals, like, there's the unique stuff that drives interest, that's going to be unique, that really sort of provides interest, and ultimately and is a view for your brand, which is great. But you got to have the bread and butter. You got to have the condos in Panama City that are going to drive the majority of bookings. But the tree house on the coast is what you put on the front page of the website. So I think Airbnb could do it both. They can have the tree houses and lighthouses and all that, but you got to have the bread and butter of the experience that people are going to book if you're ultimately going to build it to $1 billion business or multi-billion dollar business. So they can't just drive what ultimately needs to be a big part of their business off of bespoke offerings around the world.
And what's wild, I think the brand itself, Tripadvisor, is very widely known worldwide, globally. What is interesting is you look at the market cap of Tripadvisor and it's about 2 billion. And then you look at some recent valuations on Viator and it's over 2 billion. So there's some mismatch here, and that's why there's this pressure to spin it off. But that's basically valuing Tripadvisor at zero or negative in some cases.
It's
tough. Which is tough. I don't know why you could justify spinning it out, because then if your cash cow is gone, then you have no cows. So it's probably best just to sell the whole thing. But that's just my 2 cents. There's definitely people smarter than me that are figuring out why.
Yeah. So we'll see. I think we love the game, the speculation game of what is Airbnb going to do with all that money they have? It could be its own predictions chunk that we have every year. But coming up this week, do you guys have anything fun on the docket, or same old, same old?
Well, I'm heading down to 30A at the end of the week for the holiday weekend. So not exactly same old, same old. Heading out after school on Thursday.
Yeah, we're going to be out of town again this weekend, heading up to Lake Hartwell. Wife's uncle has a lake house up there, so we're going to be hanging out. But I was in Denver last week, staying home this week, getting ready for Expedia's Vrbo's conference in a couple weeks. So excited about that one.
Yeah, you'll be able to report live about what happens and if there are actual pitchforks and how riled up people get. Amazing. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you all next week.